My son called me, his voice as serene as a calm lake, and announced, "Dad, I'm getting married tomorrow. I've emptied all your accounts and sold the house. Goodbye." I exploded in a fit of rage. He had no idea about the house he claimed to have sold. Well, we'll get to that. For now, I'm just glad you're here with me. Please give this video a thumbs up, listen to my story until the very end, and tell me in the comments from which city you're tuning in. That way, I'll know how far my tale has traveled. I spent 37 years meticulously building my life, brick by painstaking brick. My name is Ernesto Morales, and at 62 years of age, I thought I had weathered every storm life could throw my way. I resided in a modest 2-bedroom dwelling in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of Houston, worked part-time at the municipal library, and cherished my predictable routine. My son, Diego, was 34, always driven, perhaps excessively so. His mother, Rosa, had passed when Diego was merely 12. I raised him alone, working double shifts, forgoing all personal indulgencies. I believed this sacrifice would at least guarantee his loyalty. The first tremor of unease surfaced 3 months before everything unraveled. Diego called, requesting my bank account details. "Dad, I want to help you set up automatic payments," he'd said, his voice as smooth as honey. "You're getting on in years. I don't want you to miss anything important." A knot of doubt tightened in my stomach, but he was my son, my only son. I recalled the sleepless nights, the overtime hours, the birthdays celebrated with a cheap cake due to financial constraints. I thought, surely I must trust him with something after all I'd done for him, and so I provided him with the information. The second warning sign appeared 6 weeks later. Diego arrived for a visit accompanied by his fiancée, Brenda. She was 26, possessing a striking beauty, sharp and calculating, the kind that makes you uneasy without quite knowing why. They settled into my living room, Brenda's eyes sweeping over the furniture, the artwork, the antique clock on the mantelpiece. "This house must be worth quite a bit, Ernesto," she remarked, omitting any familial title or formal address. "The real estate market around here has really boomed." "It's my home," I stated simply. "I have no interest in selling." Diego chuckled and squeezed her hand. "Of course not, Dad. Brenda's just making conversation." Yet something in her gaze turned my stomach. Then came the bank statements. Every Sunday morning, I'd check my accounts online with my coffee. This particular Sunday in late October, my heart stopped. My savings account, holding $17,000 painstakingly accumulated over a decade of labor, my wife's insurance money, and years of foregoing vacations and new clothes, showed a balance of $200. My checking account was nearly depleted, just $53 remaining. My hands trembled as I dialed the bank. The representative, a pleasant young woman named Lucia, reviewed my transaction history. "Senor Morales, these withdrawals were made through your online banking. The transfers went to an account set up in the name of Diego Morales. Is he your son?" I couldn't answer. I hung up without a word and sat in my kitchen, staring at the wall for 3 hours. How could he? Why would he do this? I had given him everything, my youth, my opportunities, my relationships, and this was his repayment. The next morning, my phone rang. Diego. I almost answered, but something compelled me to hesitate before picking up. "Hi, Dad. Great news. I'm getting married tomorrow. Brenda and I decided not to wait. We're having a beautiful ceremony at the Rio Clara Country Club." My throat constricted. "Diego, my accounts." He actually laughed. "Yes, Dad, I took the money. I needed funds for the wedding and our new beginning. Don't worry, you'll have plenty for yourself. And one more thing. I sold the house. I had the power of attorney for those documents you signed last year, remember? The sale closed yesterday. You have 30 days to vacate." The world tilted. "You sold my house?" "I got a very good price, $40,000. That'll be our down payment on an apartment in the city. I need to hang up. The wedding planner is calling. We'll talk after the honeymoon. Bye, Dad." The line went dead, leaving me with the phone in my hand, the weight of betrayal crushing my chest. Slowly, something else began to rise within me. It wasn't anger. Not yet. It was something colder, harder, that twisted my lips into a smile. I started to laugh. First softly, then louder, until tears streamed down my face. Diego had no idea what he had just done. That house he thought he'd sold, my so-called humble suburban abode, valued at $40,000, was the biggest mistake of his life because the house Diego sold wasn't the one I actually lived in. The property he'd disposed of was a rental property I'd purchased 15 years prior, title in my name for tax purposes, and occupied by tenants with a lease still valid for 18 months. My actual home, the one I was sitting in, mortgage-free and valued at approximately $600,000, was held in trust for my late wife's family, the Rosa and Morales Family Trust. Diego didn't even know of its existence. Ah, my greedy, foolish son, what have you gotten yourself into? The laughter gradually subsided, leaving behind something more solid, like ice in my bones. I sat at the kitchen table in my actual kitchen and forced myself to think clearly about what I had truly lost. The sale of the rental property would create a legal nightmare for him. When the buyers discovered the tenants with a valid lease, lawsuits would commence. The Hernandez family had resided there for 3 years and had 16 months remaining on their contract. Diego would face lawsuits from the buyers for fraud and quite possibly criminal charges for selling property he legally had no right to sell. That power of attorney he mentioned, I had never signed anything of the sort. What hurt the most was the loss of my savings. Those $17,000 represented my security, my independence, my medical future. That money was intended to ensure I would never be a burden to anyone. The cruel irony was that my own son had stolen it precisely to avoid being responsible for me. But there was something fundamental Diego didn't understand. I wasn't helpless. I wasn't a befuddled old man ready to accept betrayal silently. Before working at the library, I had spent decades in law offices. I understood contracts, property law, fraud, and even better, I kept meticulous records. I opened my filing cabinet and retrieved a folder labeled Rental Property Los Robles Street. Inside were copies of the lease with the Hernandez family, the security deposit receipt, and the deed in my name. I had never given Diego power of attorney, so he couldn't claim he had it or that it was forged. Then I checked the property folder. My actual home, where I sat at that moment, was in the name of the Rosa and Morales Family Trust. I was the trustee and beneficiary, but the property wasn't listed in my name as an individual. Diego had grown up in this house, but he'd never bothered to understand the legal structure that protected it. I brewed myself coffee and began to compile a list of tasks. First, report the theft to the police. Second, contact the bank's fraud department. Third, hire an attorney. Fourth, ensure the Hernandez family was protected and informed. Fifth, gather evidence of Diego's fraud in selling the property. As I wrote, my hand slowed. Did I truly want to send my son to prison? The thought made me nauseous. Despite everything, he was still the child I'd cradled, the teenager I'd helped with homework, the young man I'd been proud of when he graduated. Then I remembered his voice on the phone, cheerful, carefree. "You'll have plenty for yourself?" As if he'd done nothing wrong. What kind of man had I raised? I thought of Brenda, with her calculating eyes and sharp remarks about the house's value. Was she the instigator, or was Diego always capable of such cruelty, and I simply refused to see it? My phone vibrated, a text message from my neighbor and friend. "Ernesto, I saw a 'for sale' sign on your rental on De Los Robles yesterday, and it's gone today. Everything okay?" I replied, "It's a long story. Let's have coffee tomorrow." Patricia had been my friend for 15 years and worked as a paralegal before retiring. I would need allies for what was to come. That night, I barely slept, picturing Diego's face when he realized what he had done. Would he repent, beg for forgiveness, or blame me, claiming I had tricked him? By dawn, I had a plan. I wouldn't go to the police immediately. First, I would gather every piece of evidence, document every crime, and build an irrefutable case. Then I would present Diego with a choice: full voluntary restitution or criminal prosecution. I would give him one single chance to do the right thing, one single chance to prove he was still my son, not the stranger who had laughed while robbing me. Precisely at 9 o'clock in the morning, I called the bank. "I want to report fraud and theft from my accounts," I said, "and I need a complete statement of all transactions for the past 6 months." "Of course, Señor Morales. I am very sorry for what happened. We will begin an investigation immediately," Lucia replied. Then I called Martin Garcia, an attorney who attended my book club. "Martin, I need your help. My son took my savings and fraudulently sold my property. I need legal representation, and everything must remain confidential until I decide to act." He paused for a few seconds. "Ernesto, this is very serious. What is the amount involved?" "17,000 from my savings and approximately 40,000 from the fraudulent sale." "My God, yes, I will help you. Come to my office." Later that afternoon, I hung up and looked at myself in the hallway mirror. My silver hair was neatly combed. My eyes remained clear and steady. I looked like the quintessential kindly grandfather next door. But Diego had forgotten something. Kindly grandfathers could also be warriors when necessary. He wanted to get married the next day. Fine. Let him enjoy his wedding. Let him think he had won. I would wait, gather my strength, and then show him what happens when you betray the man who gave you life. Martin's office was in an unassuming brick building downtown. We sat opposite each other, my file folder between us. He read everything with growing incredulity, making notes from time to time. "Ernesto, this is worse than I thought," he said, finally removing his glasses. "Your son forged documents to sell a property that didn't belong to him. This isn't just civil fraud, it's a criminal offense. He could face 5 to 10 years in prison." "I know," I replied softly, "but I need to understand all my options before deciding how to proceed." "All right," he nodded. "First, we file a fraud report with your bank to freeze any further transactions. Then we notify the title company that handled the sale. They need to know the transaction was fraudulent. Then, a police report. You can request they conduct an investigation before pressing formal charges. That way, we control the timeline a bit." "And the buyers of the house?" I asked. "Most likely they will sue Diego for fraud once they discover the tenants. They may also sue the title company for not uncovering this. One way or another, Diego will be held responsible for the full purchase price and damages." Martin looked at me seriously. "I have to ask, are you sure you want to go through with this? He's your son." I met his gaze. He stole my life savings and tried to throw me onto the street. What son does that? We spent 2 hours preparing the paperwork. By the time I left Martin's office, we had filed fraud reports with both the bank and the title company. The police report was to be filed the next morning. As I walked to my car, my phone rang. "Dad, why is the bank calling me about a fraud investigation? What's going on?" Diego sounded agitated. "The bank flagged the transfers from my accounts as suspicious," I replied calmly. "It's standard procedure when large sums are moved." "But I'm your son. Tell them it's okay." "It is okay, Diego. You took $17,000 without my permission." His tone shifted, becoming harder. "I had your permission. You gave me access to your accounts to help in emergencies, not so you could empty everything I have. This isn't help, it's theft." "It's not theft, it's a loan. Brenda and I will pay you back as soon as we're on our feet. And the house sale was perfectly legal. I had power of attorney." "Diego, I never signed a power of attorney." Silence. "Yes, you did. Remember when you were in the hospital with pneumonia? I brought the papers to your room." I felt a chill run down my spine. I had indeed been in the hospital last year for 4 days with severe pneumonia. I barely remembered those days. The fever, the medication, the exhaustion. "I need to see those papers." Dad, stop making this difficult. It's all legal. Call the bank and tell them to cancel the investigation. Please, the wedding is tomorrow. I don't want this stress. You should have thought of that before robbing your father. I hung up before hearing his reply. That evening, Patricia came over with wine and comfort. I told her everything and watched her face transform from shock to outrage. "That scoundrel," she said. "I know I'll be with you every step of the way, as a witness for the investigation, for whatever you need." "Thank you," I replied, feeling the weight of true friendship. "Actually, I do need something. I want to talk to the Hernandez family. They need to know what's happening." "We called together," responded a concerned Thomas Hernandez. "Señor Ernesto, is everything all right?" I explained the situation cautiously. "So your son sold the house we live in without telling you or us?" he asked incredulously. "What will happen to our lease?" "Your lease remains valid," I reassured him. "I'm working with my lawyer to sort everything out. You are protected, but I wanted to warn you in case the buyers try to pressure you." "Good heavens, thank you for warning us. Count on us for whatever you need, testimony, evidence, anything." After we hung up, Patricia poured more wine. "Diego has no idea what's coming," she observed. "He thinks I'm a befuddled old man to be manipulated," I replied. The next morning, I received an email from the title company. My hands trembled as I read it. "Señor Morales, our investigation has revealed serious irregularities in the sale of the property located at 1247 De Los Robles Street. The power of attorney presented by Diego Morales appears to bear your signature. However, the notary's seal belongs to a notary whose license had expired on the date in question. Furthermore, the document is dated during your hospitalization, and our records show the notary was in another state that day. We consider this a potential forgery and fraud. Funds from the sale have been frozen pending investigation. The buyers have been informed and are initiating legal action against Señor Morales." I forwarded the email to Martin with a single line. He forged it all. It was the proof I needed. Diego hadn't just been reckless or morally questionable. He had committed calculated fraud. I pictured him entering my hospital room with papers I could barely see, perhaps slipping blank pages for me to sign, then filling them out later to obtain fraudulent notarizations. Then another message arrived from Diego. "Dad, we need to talk. Can you come to the wedding tomorrow, please? I want you there." I stared at the screen. He wanted me to attend a wedding paid for with my stolen money. I typed, "I will be there." Let him think everything is fine. Let him marry his calculating bride. Let him celebrate with my money. Let him continue to believe he had gotten away with it. I would smile, pose for pictures, play the role of the proud father, and then, when he least expected it, I would show him the consequences of betraying the man who gave him life. The wedding was exactly as I had imagined, extravagant, ostentatious, and utterly devoid of warmth. The Rio Clara Country Club shimmered with white roses and crystal chandeliers. I donned my best suit, a dark navy, elegant and understated, and arrived early. Brenda was radiant in a gown that surely cost thousands, my $10,000. Diego, in his tuxedo, beamed as if he had not a single worry in the world. Upon seeing me, he rushed over. "You really came, Dad?" He embraced me tightly. "I'm so glad you're here. I know things have been strange lately, but this is a new beginning for all of us." I looked at him intently. He truly believed that robbing me was merely a strange blip. "Congratulations, Diego," I said, my voice neutral. "You look very happy." Brenda approached, her smile sharp. "Ernesto, how lovely of you to come. Diego was worried you'd still be angry about, well, the money in the house, but it's really for the best. You don't need such a big house anymore, and Diego and I can build our future." "How thoughtful," I replied, my tone genial, my gaze icy. The ceremony was brief. I sat in the front row watching my son pledge to love and cherish a woman who had helped him betray his own father. During the reception, I made polite conversation, sipped champagne I barely tasted, and smiled for photographs I would never wish to see again. Just as they were cutting the cake, my phone vibrated. A message from Martin. Police have opened an investigation. Fraud charges are being prepared. We are proceeding. I looked at Diego, laughing with friends, none the wiser. Not yet, I thought. Let him savor this last bit of joy. It will be his last for a long time. The confrontation came 3 days later. Diego and Brenda appeared at my door unannounced. He was furious. Brenda's face was tight, cold. Diego pushed the door open and entered without invitation. "What the hell did you do?" he roared. "The title company froze the sale money. They say the power of attorney is fake. They're threatening to sue me." I calmly closed the door. "Perhaps because it is fake," I replied. "You took advantage of me when I was sick to make me sign papers I didn't understand, and then you forged a notary seal. That's a crime, Diego, and on top of that, you stole my life savings." Brenda stepped forward. "This is ridiculous. Diego was simply helping you. You're an old man, Ernesto. You can't manage your finances and your property anymore. We did you a favor." "A favor?" I echoed. "To empty my accounts and sell a house you couldn't sell? It's not theft if you're too senile to manage it." She spat. "Diego, your son. Everything you have will go to him anyway. We just expedited the process. Understand?" I said very calmly. "So, that was the plan. Find a man with a father who has money, manipulate him into robbing his father, and build your life on it." "Don't you dare talk about Brenda like that," Diego protested. "She loves me." "She loves your inheritance, or what she believes is your inheritance," I corrected. Brenda leaned in close. "You will retract these accusations," she said with a glacial smile, "or we will make your life a living hell. We'll say you have dementia. We'll get you declared incompetent. We'll put you in a nursing home." I felt a chill run through my veins. "That's a threat. That's a promise," Diego said in a low, menacing voice. "I'm trying to be reasonable. Just call the bank and the title company and tell them it was all with your authorization. This way, we all go on living our lives. If not, we will drown you in lawsuits for years. We have lawyers galore. We will spend every last cent you have on retainers and tell everyone you're senile." For a moment, fear gripped me. Not because of their threats. I had proof. It was because of who my son had become. This enraged, threatening man was a stranger in his face, but I hadn't lived 37 years alone by being weak. "Get out of my house," I said in a voice of steel I barely recognized. "Both of you, immediately. Get out, Dad. You have 5 seconds before I call the police. 1. I didn't count to 2. They were gone. Brenda was shouting an insult at Diego, her face contorted in fury. Watching their car drive away, I collapsed onto the sofa, my hands trembling. The masks were gone. I knew exactly who I was dealing with. The next morning, I called Martin. "File the official complaint. I want them prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law." "Are you sure?" "Absolutely." The following days, I devoted to recuperating. I read, tended to my garden, and had dinner with Patricia. I needed to regain my physical and emotional strength. The confrontation had shaken me more than I cared to admit. But as I watered my roses, feeling the sun on my face, I noticed something new growing inside me. A cold, absolute resolve. Diego and Brenda had made their choice. Now they would live with the consequences. A week after that confrontation, Diego called again. His voice sounded different, softer, almost childlike, like when he was little and wanted something. "Dad, can we talk, please?" I considered hanging up. Instead, I said, "I'm listening." "I've been thinking a lot about everything, about what I did." His voice cracked. "I was wrong, Dad. I know. I let Brandy fill my head, the stress of the wedding, everything piled up. But you're my father. I should never have." He trailed off. He sounded genuinely contrite or was an excellent actor. Forgive me, Dad. We can fix this. My heart ached for the man who remembered carrying him, teaching him to ride a bike, cheering at his graduations. I wanted to believe him and forgive him immediately, but I had already learned my lesson about blind trust. What specifically do you propose, Diego? I'll pay you back, all of it. Brandy and I will take out a loan if we have to, and I'll handle the house. I'll talk to the buyers. I'll sort everything out. He was speaking quickly now, breathlessly. Just please stop the investigation. I can't have a criminal record, Dad. It will ruin my career, my entire life. You should have thought about that before you committed fraud, I replied. I know, and I'm sorry, but give me a chance to make it right. Don't ruin my life over one mistake. One mistake? As if robbing your own father was akin to forgetting his birthday. How long will it take you to repay the money? I asked. Maybe 6 months, a year, at the most. We need time to get the loan. You don't have 6 months, Diego. The investigation is already underway. He became desperate. Then what do you want? Tell me what you want. I want full restitution within 30 days, I said. Every dollar you took, with interest. I want a written confession, and I want you to face the consequences of your actions. That's impossible. We can't get that much money in 30 days. Then you should have thought before stealing from me. You're cruel. You have no heart. I'm your son, your only son. How can you do this to me? And how could you do this to me? I replied softly. I hung up and turned off my phone. Later that day, Brenda arrived alone. I saw her from the window. She stepped out of a pristine car wearing a cream-colored suit. She rang the doorbell 3 times before I opened it. Ernesto, we need to talk face to face, she said with a practiced smile. May I come in? No. She blinked in surprise. I'm trying to make peace. Make peace from the porch. Her jaw tightened, but she maintained her composure. Look, I know. You think I'm a gold digger manipulating your son, but I love Diego truly, and I'm trying to save him from this catastrophe. By convincing me to drop the charges, I said. By convincing you to come to your senses, she corrected. Do you realize what a criminal case will do to his life, his career, our future? Yes, I answered. That's precisely why we must see this through. Brenda looked at me intently and let out a bitter laugh. You know what? Diego was right about you. You're a selfish old man who can't stand to see him happy. You're so bitter and lonely that you'd rather drown your own son. When he's in prison, when your relationship is ruined forever, you'll realize you chose money over your son. You'll die alone, and it will be your fault. Goodbye, Brenda, I said, closing the door in her furious face. That evening, Patricia came with her husband, Miguel, and 2 other couples from the Himnos and Rivera book club. They brought food, wine, and something even more valuable, support. We've heard everything, Patricia said, hugging me. We wanted you to know that you're not alone. We sat in the living room, and I told them everything. Not just the facts, but the pain, the guilt, the fear that I was doing something unforgivable by suing my own son. They listened without judgment. You're doing the right thing, Miguel said firmly. What Diego did is a crime. If you let it slide, you'll show him that he can betray anyone without consequence. Carolina nodded. My brother stole from my mother. She forgave him, didn't press charges. 5 years later, he did it again. There are people who only learn when they face real consequences. Their words wrapped around me like a warm blanket. I wasn't crazy, and I wasn't cruel. I was a man protecting himself from someone who had revealed himself to be dangerous, even if that someone was his son. As they left, Patricia squeezed my hand. Be strong, Ernesto. You're doing a difficult but right thing. The next day, I called Martin. No deals, no settlements, we go all the way. Understood, he replied. And if it means anything, I think you're incredibly brave. Brave or broken? I wasn't sure, but I knew there was no turning back. They came again. This time, on a Sunday morning, when the neighborhood was quiet, I saw them from the window. Diego and Brenda walked up the path to the house at a measured pace. Diego carried flowers, Brenda a box from a patisserie, peace offerings. I almost opened the door, but curiosity got the better of me. What new strategy did they bring? "Dad," Diego said, his voice soft, his eyes red as if he had been crying. "We asked for just 5 minutes." Against my better judgment, I let them in. We sat in the living room, they on the sofa, me in my armchair, maintaining my distance. Diego placed the flowers on the coffee table. "Daisy's my favorite." Of course, he remembered. "Dad, we were wrong," he began. "About everything. About how we spoke to you, about what we did. It's unforgivable." He leaned forward, his expression earnest. "For the past few weeks, I haven't slept. I've been thinking about what I did, how I hurt you. You're my father. You raised me alone, gave me everything, and I repaid you with betrayal." It was exactly what I had always wanted to hear, and that's precisely why it felt like a performance. Brenda spoke, her voice hushed. "Ernesto, I owe you an apology too. I was terrible to you, said cruel things. The truth is, I was scared. My parents are poor. I grew up with nothing. When I met Diego, I saw an opportunity for a better life, and I overstepped. I pushed him to do things he shouldn't have." "Things you convinced him to do?" I asked. "Yes," she admitted, looking me in the eye. "The idea about the money, about the house, that was my doing. Diego didn't want to. I pressured him, told him you wouldn't notice, that you wanted to see him happy. I was wrong. I'm sorry. Truly." Diego took my hand. I didn't pull away. "Dad, we want to make amends. We're willing to do whatever it takes. We've already taken out a second mortgage on the apartment. We can give you $100,000 in 2 weeks. The rest will take longer, but we will pay you back everything, with interest." Brenda added quickly, "Whatever you deem fair." "And the criminal case?" I asked. Diego's face fell. "That's the problem, Dad. If I have a record, I'll lose my job. I work in finance. I'll be fired. How will I ever pay you back? How will I provide for a family?" "I'm not asking you to forgive me. I don't deserve it. I'm just asking for a chance to make it right without destroying my future." "Please, Ernesto," Brenda added. "We want children. Diego wants to give you grandchildren, but he can't do that from a prison cell." Grandchildren. The word struck me in the chest. I had always dreamed of holding Diego's children, telling them our family's stories. They knew exactly where to hit. "Think about it carefully," Diego pressed. "Do you really want your future grandchildren to visit their father in prison? Do you want them to grow up knowing their grandfather put their father there?" I looked at them both. The performance was good. Diego's tears seemed genuine. Brenda's contrition sounded convincing, but I noticed the details. The way she furtively glanced at her watch, the tension in Diego's shoulders, his hand gripping mine too tightly when I didn't respond. "And if I say no?" I asked quietly. The shift was instantaneous. Diego's expression hardened. Brenda leaned back, crossing her arms. "Then you choose to destroy your own son," Diego said coldly. "And for what? For money you don't even need. You have your precious house, your comfortable life. You'll take it all away from me out of pride." "It's not pride, it's justice." "Justice?" Brenda scoffed dryly. "And justice for us? Diego is your only son. Everything you have will eventually go to him anyway. We're just accelerating the process a bit." "So, in your view, it would have been ideal if I had died earlier for his convenience?" I countered. "Don't twist things," Brenda huffed. "You're a vindictive old man who can't stand to see him happy." Diego didn't defend me. He just watched, waiting to see if this approach would work better than tears. I slowly stood up. "Get out of my house! Dad, get out!" My voice trembled with fury. "You come here with flowers and fake apologies, trying to manipulate me into letting you rob me without consequences. Do you really think I don't see what you're doing?" Diego jumped up. His face was red. "You'll regret this when I'm sitting in a cell, when Brenda leaves me because I can't provide for her, when you spend every Christmas alone. Remember that you chose this." "I didn't choose this," I said, my voice icy. "You chose this the day you decided to steal from your father." Brenda grabbed his arm. "Let's go. He's not worth it. Let him rot here alone with his money." They slammed the door, leaving. I remained in the living room, trembling not from fear, but from rage. They had tried everything: apologies, manipulation, guilt, threats. They even offered me grandchildren as a bargaining chip, as if I would trade my dignity for a few family photos. But beneath the rage was a cold thread of doubt. What if Diego is right? What if I am destroying him? What if in a few years I regret this? I didn't push these thoughts away. That day, I saw what lay beneath their masks. They regretted not the pain they had caused me, but only that they had been caught. I threw the daisies in the trash and called Martin. "They just visited, trying to manipulate me into dropping the charges," I explained. "Offered to return some of the money if we dropped everything." "What did you tell them?" "To get out of my house." A pause, then Martin's warm chuckle. "Good for you, Ernesto. That takes a lot of strength." Strength or stubbornness, I didn't know, but there was no turning back now. The day of the trial arrived 6 weeks later. Martin had prepared me for everything: the process, the questions, the possibility that Diego might take a plea deal. But he, stubborn and deluded, refused. He was convinced the jury would side with the son against a vengeful father. I put on a simple gray suit and combed my hair neatly. Martin had told me, "You need to look vulnerable, but firm. You're not a victim. You're a survivor." The courtroom was stark, lit by fluorescent lights that gleamed off the polished floors. I sat at the prosecution table, my hands clasped. Diego was on the other side with Brenda and his lawyer, Ricardo Chen, an elegant man specializing in financial crimes. When our eyes met, I saw something I hadn't expected: genuine fear. Good. Finally, he understood the gravity of the situation. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Andrea Rios, presented a compelling case: bank records of unauthorized transfers, testimony from the title company about a forged power of attorney, handwriting analysis confirming a forged signature. The Hernandez family testified about their existing lease agreement and the chaos that had almost cost them their home. The defense strategy was clear: portray me as a confused and bitter old man who had reconsidered helping his son. Chen stood for his opening statement. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this is a case of a family misunderstanding and belated regret. Ernesto Morales gave his son Diego access to his accounts and the authority to manage his assets. Why? Because he is 62 years old. He lives alone and needed assistance. Diego did not rob his father. He acted with his consent. But now, influenced by third parties and due to age-related confusion, Mr. Morales has rewritten history and is presenting himself as a victim." I felt my blood boil, but I maintained a calm facade. The trial proceeded with methodical calm. Andrea called witnesses one by one, building her case brick by brick. A bank teller testified that I had called her as soon as I discovered the missing money, crying and disoriented. The title company representative explained the irregularity in the documentation. The Cherkovet expert showed that my signature on the purported power of attorney did not match my usual signature. It was shaky, uncertain, characteristic of someone signing under the influence of strong medication or without full consciousness. Then it was my turn. I walked to the witness stand, placed my hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. Andrea led my testimony, firm yet gentle. I spoke of my relationship with Diego, how proud I was of raising him alone, my devastation upon discovering his betrayal. "Mr. Morales," Andrea asked, "did you give Diego permission to withdraw $17,000 from your savings account?" "No," I replied clearly. "Never." Did you authorize him to sell your rental property? No. That house provides income that supplements my pension. I would never have authorized its sale. Did you sign a power of attorney giving Diego control over your finances? Unknowingly. I was hospitalized with severe pneumonia. I had a very high fever. Diego brought some papers and said it was for insurance forms. I barely remember those days. Chen questioned me aggressively, trying to portray me as vindictive and confused, but I was prepared. Is it true, Mr. Morales, that you disapprove of Diego's relationship with Brenda? He asked. No, I don't approve of having my entire life stolen. Did you have arguments about his relationship, didn't you? Like any family, but this trial isn't about whom my son loves. It's about financial crimes. You live alone, correct? No close relatives other than Diego. I live alone, yes. That doesn't make me a liar, nor does it make me a vindictive person. Chen tried various angles, but nothing worked. The truth was on my side. Then it was Diego's turn. Chen guided him through his version of events, how he had worried about me, how I had supposedly asked him to manage my finances, how I was, according to him, happy to help with the wedding. His performance was polished and convincing. Then Andrea stood for cross-examination, and it all began to unravel. Mr. Morales, she said, you stated that your father asked you to help manage his money. When exactly did he make this request? It was something we had been discussing for months, he mumbled. Can you provide any text message, email, or note confirming this request? It was verbal. I see. Regarding the power of attorney, you stated your father signed it voluntarily at the hospital. However, the notary whose seal is on the document was in California that day, and the hospital was in Texas. How could this notary have witnessed the signature? Diego paled. I don't know. There must be a mistake in the records. A mistake? Andrea raised an eyebrow. Or you forged the notarization after obtaining your father's signature by deception. I did not forge anything. Let's talk about the sale of the Los Robles street property, she continued. Did you inform the buyers about the existing lease with the Hernandez family? I thought they knew. By the grace of the Holy Spirit? Andrea asked dryly. You represented yourself as the owner with full authority to sell. You did not deem it your duty to disclose the presence of tenants with an active lease. Diego began to contradict himself, stammer, repeat. The jury watched as his well-rehearsed narrative crumbled. The truth, Mr. Morales, Andrea concluded, is that you knew exactly what you were doing. You forged documents, sold property that did not belong to you, emptied your father's account, and did so for one reason, to fund your wedding and your new life. Is that not so? No, I just wanted to help him. He wanted to be robbed. He wanted to be left with no savings and no home. The judge sustained Chen's objection to the leading question, but the damage was done. The jury had seen Diego lose his composure, seen him lie to himself out loud. As closing arguments concluded, I felt a strange calm. My part was done. I had told the truth, presented the evidence, and stood firm against manipulation. What happened next was out of my hands. We stood as the jury retired for deliberations. Before leaving, Diego looked at me one last time. His eyes, always full of confidence, were now empty and scared. I met his gaze, unflinching. This was the son I had raised, and this was the judgment he had earned. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. When they returned, their faces were solemn but resolute. On the charge of grand theft, what is your verdict regarding the defendant? Guilty. On the charge of fraud, what is your verdict regarding the defendant? Guilty. On the charge of forgery, what is your verdict regarding the defendant? Guilty. Diego's face crumbled. Brenda let out a muffled sob. I sat very still, feeling the weight of the word echo through the room. Guilty. The judge set the sentencing date for 2 weeks later. Diego was released on bail, but reality had set in. He was going to prison. Reporters waited outside. Martin had warned me the case had attracted local attention. Elderly father sues own son for theft. "Mr. Morales, what do you feel after the verdict?" a journalist asked. I stopped and answered clearly. "I feel that justice has been served. What my son did was a crime. He betrayed the person who loved him most and must face the consequences." What would you say to other families suffering from financial elder abuse? Yes, you are not obligated to protect those who harm you, even if it is family, especially if it is family. Loving without boundaries and without consequences is not love. It is enabling abuse. The sentencing hearing proved even more arduous. Judge Gabriela Mendez listened to the impact statements from both sides. The Hernandez family spoke of their fear of losing their home. The home's buyers detailed the financial ruin that nearly destroyed them. I recounted the betrayal, the humiliation, the deep wound of seeing one's son turn into a thief. Then Diego's attorney implored for leniency. Diego, tears streaming, addressed the judge. "Your Honor," he began, "I know I cannot undo what I've done. I betrayed my father, a man who sacrificed everything for me. I let greed and foolishness shatter our relationship. I understand that I must be punished. I only ask for compassion, for a chance to start anew and someday to atone for my actions." The judge regarded him for a long moment. "Mr. Morales," she finally declared, "you did not commit a mere mistake. You made a series of calculated decisions. You forged documents, you exploited your father's illness, you defrauded several individuals. These were not impulsive crimes, nor were they born of desperation, but rather of a sense of entitlement and avarice." She paused. "You showed no remorse until you were exposed. You threatened your own father when he sought justice. You do not deserve leniency." She sentenced him to 7 years of imprisonment, with eligibility for parole after 4 years. Furthermore, he was ordered to provide full restitution to myself and the buyers, along with court costs and penalties. The total sum exceeded $200,000. Diego collapsed into a chair, sobbing. Brenda stood frozen, her face contorted. As the bailiff led him away in handcuffs, he glanced at me one last time, and I met his gaze in silence. There was nothing left to say. A few days later, Martin and I met to discuss the restitution order. "The court has frozen Diego and Brenda's assets," he explained. "The apartment they purchased will be sold. Their accounts will be seized. They will be paying you for years, perhaps decades." "And Brenda?" I asked. "She faces no criminal charges because Diego signed and executed everything. But as his wife, she bears civil liability for the restitution. Her wages can be garnished, her accounts frozen, any property in her name can be attached." I thought of the woman who had called me an old egoist who spoke of grandchildren as if they were bargaining chips. It seemed justice had plans for her, too. Over time, the consequences snowballed. Diego lost his job in the financial sector. No company wanted to associate with a convicted fraudster. Brenda scrubbed her social media, once filled with wedding photos and motivational quotes. Friends and acquaintances distanced themselves. The apartment was sold at a loss in a foreclosure proceeding. I received my first restitution payment, $8,000 from that sale. Reclaiming the full amount would take years. But the system was working. The Hernandez family sent me a card. "Thank you for your courage in seeking justice. You saved our home and taught our children a lesson about what fairness means." Patricia organized a dinner to mark the end of the proceedings. Our book club raised a toast to my strength, my resilience, my resolve not to be trampled. "You accomplished something remarkable, Ernesto," Miguel said. "Most would have given up, but you persevered." "I had no choice," I replied. "He left me no other path." Yet as we clinked our glasses, a void ached in my chest. I had won in court, but I had lost my son. The boy to whom I'd once fastened a new backpack before school no longer existed. He had been replaced by a man who valued money more than his own father. However, I retained something I would not relinquish: my self-respect, my home, my future. 6 months after the sentencing, my life blossomed in ways I could never have imagined. I started a small consulting project helping seniors protect themselves from financial abuse. Patricia joined me, and we began hosting workshops in community centers and churches. Every person we aided imbued my pain with purpose. My wound found its calling. I traveled to Ireland and Canada, visiting old friends, and for my 63rd birthday, Patricia threw me a surprise party. Looking at the smiling faces around me, I realized Diego had been wrong. I was not alone. I had a community, a purpose, and genuine happiness. Meanwhile, Diego's world continued to crumble. Prison proved brutal. He was beaten twice. Depression and anxiety attacks plagued him. Brenda filed for divorce 8 months later, portraying herself as yet another victim. She moved back in with her parents and worked 2 retail jobs to cover her share of the restitution. Her social media vanished. No one wanted to be associated with a woman who had robbed an elder. Diego's financial career was obliterated. He lost his license, and his former company sued him. When he applied for parole, it was denied. Without a job, without references, without proof of genuine rehabilitation, he would serve the full 7 years. I chose to care for myself, and paradoxically, that decision led me to the richest period of my life. Looking back, I understand what happened. I loved him so much, so unconditionally, that I forgot to teach him to love me in return. I gave without limits, sacrificed without measure, and in doing so, I raised a man who felt entitled to take whatever he desired. The most profound lesson I learned is that love without respect is worthless, and a family of disorder is merely a shared surname. My son is in prison because he committed a crime, not because I am vengeful. He chose avarice over love. I did not destroy his life. He did that himself. The only thing I did was refuse to accompany him in that destruction. And now I want to ask you, my listener, what would you have done if your son had betrayed you in such a manner? Would you have had the strength to choose justice over guilt? Thank you for hearing my story to the end. Please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this, and tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. Perhaps your message will help someone else set boundaries and remember that protecting yourself is not selfish, it is survival. Yes,